Thank you all so much for coming to our event tonight. My name is Dylan Bowen. I'm the co-founder and president of Thoughts Effective Altruism. We are part of an international social movement that uses reason and evidence to find the most effective ways to improve the world. So for tonight's main event, 9 of us, although not all of them are here, are pledging between 1 and 10% of our lifetime income, or in some cases 10% of our income over a temporary period of time, to the most effective charities in the world. The total amount of donations that we're pledging is about $2.9 million in nominal value, expected nominal value. It's about $2.9 million in nominal value. The discounted value we expect is about $535,000. I can get into how we calculated those numbers later. But before we get to the main event, I'd just like to say a few introductory remarks and share with you my reflections about our group over this past year. Our overarching goal as a student group and as a social movement is to reform the practice of altruism. The purpose of altruism, we believe, should not just be to make the world a better place, but to do the most good we can with what resources we have. In practice, this means that we will do whatever is required to improve the lives of as many people and non-human animals as possible by as much as possible. To understand effective altruism, it's important to understand the difference between effective altruism and traditional altruism. That is, altruism as it is currently practiced. Nearly everyone, 90% of donors in the US, as they found in one focus group, will say that they care deeply about donating to effective organizations. Almost no one, something like 3% of donors in the US, can honestly say they have done any research to ensure that they are donating to the most effective organizations. Charities thrive not based on the extent to which they improve people's lives, but based on the extent to which they pull on our heartstrings. As a result, charities have almost no financial incentive to ensure that they are implementing their projects effectively. And so it should come as no surprise that the most effective nonprofits in the world do about 1,000 times as much good per dollar compared with the average nonprofit. Traditional altruism is not guided by reason or evidence, but is guided solely by emotion and intuition. The problem is that since the dawn of our species, some 200,000 years ago, we have been evolving to survive and reproduce in small hunter-gatherer tribes to whom Mesolithic technology looked like the iPhone 7. Over the past 10,000 years, our world has fundamentally changed. And so we simply did not evolve the capacity to intuitively understand the sorts of moral systems that we require to survive and thrive in a global civilization of 7 billion people with the technological capacity to kill or save hundreds of lives halfway around the world with a push of a button. Due to our evolutionary and cultural history, our emotions and intuitions are biased in favor of our tribe members and against out-group members. What this means in practice is that we care less about people who live farther away, who come from foreign countries, and whose problems are difficult for us to relate to on an emotional level. Problematically, those of us who are most capable of helping others tend to come from wealthier countries, whose citizens are less in need of assistance than others elsewhere. The result is that people who need our help most are those we care about least. When we see a child's face on a Make-A-Wish Foundation poster, we feel a strong visceral desire to help, and we donate to the cause. End of moral calculus. We don't often think about the fact that for the cost of granting one wish to one terminally ill child, effective organizations like the Against Malaria Foundation could have saved 5 children from dying at all. Multiply this by about 1 million, and you'll start to get a sense for just how many people are needlessly suffering and dying because of the cognitive iron curtain that separates reason from compassion. This is the tragedy of traditional altruism. A child dies from malaria every minute. These deaths are entirely and easily preventable for a small sum of money. But they live far away from us. They come from foreign countries and speak foreign languages. Their problems are difficult for us to relate to on an emotional level, and so we let them suffer and die. This tragedy is being played out before our eyes on a global scale. Effective altruism, I believe, is the antidote to this problem. It breaks down the barrier between reason and compassion and allows us to combine evidence and emotion to act on our compassion in the most effective way possible. Effective altruism is based on two very simple premises. First is that all else being equal, a world with less suffering and more happiness is better than a world with more suffering and less happiness. Second is that all lives are equally important. We do not believe that certain people's lives become less valuable simply because they live far away or come from another country or because the cause of their suffering is unfamiliar to us. An African child dying from malaria is just as tragic as an American child dying from cancer. Their families grieve just as deeply. Their communities suffer just as greatly, and we ought to care just as much. We see the mentality of traditional altruism everywhere. We can see it in signs around our campus that say things like, "We can end hunger here." Everyone knows someone who has suffered from an eating disorder. Charity begins at home. Effective altruism says, we can end hunger everywhere. Effective altruism says, not everyone knows someone who suffers from schistosomiasis or hookworm or lymphatic filariasis, but we ought to care about them anyway. Effective altruism says, charity begins wherever it can do the most good. I don't think it's any coincidence that half of our executive board is from a developing country. Students from Nepal, China, Vietnam. It's because we recognize that there is a world outside of our local community, and that we need to be engaged in the process of building a global civilization. The reason I think we've had such success attracting students from diverse cultural backgrounds is that we aim to treat everyone in the world as if they were a part of our local community. Effective altruism is not just one way among many of making the world a better place. Effective altruism is the best way of making the world a better place. We want to do whatever we can to improve the lives of as many people as possible by as much as possible. In practice, this means choosing high-impact career paths, supporting evidence-based public policy, and donating to effective charities. The last of these is why we're here tonight. 9 of us are pledging between 1% and 10% of our lifetime income to the most effective charities in the world. Several students additionally will be pledging 10% of their income over a temporary period of time to the most effective charities in the world. To put this in perspective, this is about $3 million in nominal value. After discounting for temporal discounting, counterfactual donations, and member attrition, you get down to about $535,000 raised for top charities in this year alone. To put this in perspective, this is enough money to save 190 children from dying of malaria. This is enough money to provide 425,000 deworming treatments for people in Africa. This is enough money to spare 7.5 million animals from a life of suffering on a factory farm. I had very high expectations for this group from the very beginning. And we have not only met them, but exceeded them. I couldn't be more proud of how far we've come this year. I remember our first committee meeting, it was just the 4 of us in Zillion's store room in Sogo. I remember our first event just 6 months ago. We were hosting Julia Wise and Jeff Kaufman, who are a local couple from Somerville that donate 50% of their income to top recommended charities WFL. Over the past year, we've been extremely fortunate to host 11 major speaking events with 3 researchers from MIT's Poverty Action Lab, with Harvard professor Joshua Green, with MIT professor Max Tegmark, Tufts professor Daniel Dennett, and several other wonderful guest speakers. And a week from Saturday, we are co-hosting with MIT Effective Altruism, the largest effective altruism event ever held in Boston, Effective Altruism Global X, Boston 2016. We have so many people to thank for what we've achieved this year. We need to thank all of the departments that have advertised our events, especially the philosophy department, which has done a truly incredible job of advertising our events and raising awareness about Tufts Effective Altruism. We need to thank our faculty advisor, Christiane Olfer, who's done a wonderful job advising us this year. All of the student groups that have advertised for us or co-hosted events with us, including Free Thought Society, Libertarian Society, Tufts Psych Society, Peace Action, and the Leonard Carmichael Society. And of course, I need to thank our core team, who's just done such a tremendous job this year. I couldn't be more proud of you, and I couldn't have asked for a better team to work with. Stop laughing, I'm serious.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you. Now, before we do the pledges, I want to mention that in addition to all the support we've received, we've also received, I think, more than our fair share of criticism. And so I think I should take just a few minutes to address this. The most common thing I hear about effective altruism is that we are heartless, that we are lacking in empathy and human emotion, and that giving money isn't the proper way of caring for others. Just consider that 6 of the students in this room tonight, at least 6, will be giving 10% of their lifetime income, something like $500,000 each, to help total strangers, or even animals of a different species, for no other reason than the knowledge that they are effectively improving the lives of others. We are not doing this for the prestige. Donating 10% of your lifetime income isn't the sort of thing you put on your resume. It's not the sort of thing that admissions committees will look on favorably when considering your application to graduate school. It's not the sort of thing that often wins you awards or scholarships or public recognition. If you were to volunteer 4 hours a week at a local homeless shelter every week for the rest of your life, you would be viewed as a hero in your local community. But if you were to donate the income you earn from 4 hours of working every week for the rest of your life to charities that can do 1,000 times as much good with your money as the local homeless shelter can do with your labor, few people are going to think of you as a hero. If you were to spend 4 years of your life working in a developing country, teaching English or building schools, your moral character would be forever beyond reproach. But if you were to donate the income you earn from 4 years of work to charities that can do 1,000 times as much good with your money as volunteer organizations can do with your labor, few people are going to think of you as an exceptional human being. After all, it's just money. As I said, these students don't expect to be admired for their sacrifice, and to me, that's part of what makes it so admirable. If anything, I would argue that it takes a greater degree of compassion and empathy to care about people in Africa or India or China as if they were a part of our local community. People often ask me how I can care about strangers who live halfway around the world. But I think the better question is, how could anyone not care? How is it possible to know that nearly 1 billion people live on less than $2 a day? That's $2 a day adjusted for prices in their home country. And not be overwhelmed by not only grief and humility, but also a desire to help them. How could anyone not care about this? I think I speak for everyone who's taking the pledge tonight when I say that I care about these people for the same reason I care about being healthy or having enough food to eat or having a loving family. I don't care about them because I get something else from them. I care about them for their own sake because they're intrinsically valuable to me. You will not meet a more compassionate and caring group of young men and women than those you see in Tufts Effective Altruism. And I can assure you they are anything but harmless. Another common thing I hear is that effective altruism is culturally insensitive. Now, how is it possible for us to not only comprehend the problems faced by other cultures, but also to propose workable solutions to them? Doesn't this sound like arrogance? Doesn't this sound like white savior complex or neocolonialism? But I would ask, how much do we need to understand about African culture to know that mothers and fathers in Malawi don't want to see their children die of malaria? How much do we need to understand about Indian culture to know that people in Chennai and Calcutta don't want to be living every day on the brink of starvation? This objection becomes even more obviously vacuous when you look at the specific charities that effective altruists tend to donate to. The most effective charities identified by EA research organizations, like GiveWell, simply give people direct cash transfers or medical supplies that they're not producing on their own. But what could possibly be culturally insensitive about this? As I said, I don't think it's any coincidence that half of our executive board is made up of students from developing countries. I would argue, in fact, that our student group is in some sense one of the more culturally sensitive groups on campus. But instead of making this argument myself, I'd like to paraphrase something that one of my friends said, one of my best friends at Tufts, who comes from Calcutta, India. And he said this in reference to the at the time, recent uproar over Beyonce performing on stage wearing a bindi. He said, you know, Dylan, the average person in my country lives on $4 a day. Do you honestly think we care what some American pop star wears on stage? Of course not. We care about things like having enough food to feed our families and making sure our children live to see the age of 10. And if college students really cared about people from my culture, they would be at least as outraged about that as they were about Beyonce's wardrobe. The last objection I want to address is that we should be helping people at home. Why should we bother helping people in other countries when there are people who need our help right here? Now, before I address this directly, I just want to pause for a moment and ask you to imagine what this objection must feel like to students from our group who come from developing countries, who come from Vietnam or China or Nepal. Throughout this entire year, they have heard this objection over and over again. They have heard students say to them, I don't want to help people from your part of the world. I'm only interested in helping people from my part of the world. And in spite of this, they have continued to promote Tufts effective altruism and to promote the ideal that all lives are equally valuable no matter where you come from. To these students, I want to say that many members of the Tufts community owe you an apology. And I think every member of the Tufts community owes you our most sincere admiration for what you have accomplished this year. The fact is that many students who so easily recognize the moral impropriety of discriminating based on race, gender, or sexual orientation are shamelessly willing to discriminate on the basis of nationality, and I find this immensely disappointing. I think we will one day look back on this mentality, the mentality that we shouldn't donate to help people who were born on the other side of some imaginary man-made line, with the same shame and horror with which we view racism today. Why should we donate to help people abroad? Because the poorest quintile of the world's population is 10 times as destitute as the poorest quintile of the US population. Because the child mortality rate of sub-Saharan Africa is 20 times that of the US. The most effective charities working abroad are 1,000 times as effective as the average charity working at home. Global issues are in general more terrible and yet easier to mitigate than issues we face here in the United States. I'm sometimes asked how I expect effective altruism is going to work. But what I don't think some people realize is that it's already working. Just look at our impact this year. The amount of money we've raised in nominal terms is $2.9 million. Even after accounting for member attrition and temporal discounting and counterfactual donations, the value of these pledges is still over $500,000 that we've raised in this year alone for top charities. When you consider our effectiveness, every hour of time we have dedicated to this group is worth something like $340 in donations to top charities. I would guess that not only are we the most effective student organization on campus, but also that we've had a bigger overall impact than even much larger social service student organizations. As far as I know, we are the first and only student group at Tufts to have conducted a rigorous evaluation of our impact. We believe this information is important. We believe that when students are choosing which organizations to get involved with, they want to know how much good is going to come of their time and money. This is our answer. Each hour you spend working for Tufts Effective Altruism is worth approximately $340 for the most effective charities. If this sounds incredible to you, well, that's because it is. But don't take our word for it. We have all of this information on our website. You can find the data that went into our calculations, as well as the reasoning behind our calculations, on our website. It's publicly available, and we want it to be that way. When we were starting this group back in September, there was a great deal of skepticism. Many people asked, how many students do we actually think we're going to sign up to give 10% of their lifetime income to effective charities? The answer is not many. The students who are taking this pledge tonight represent 0.2% of the Tufts undergraduate population. But it's a mistake to think that in order to have an impact, we need to convince large groups of people. Sometimes, to have an extraordinary impact, you need only to convince a few extraordinary individuals. And believe me, these young men and women are extraordinary. With this pledge, we are joining 1,700 other effective altruists from 60 nations who have pledged nearly $700 million in total to the most effective charities in the world. Charity evaluation organizations like GiveWell and Animal Charity Evaluators are moving tens of millions of dollars each year. Organizations like the Future of Life Institute that focus on global catastrophic risk are growing in size, influence, and sophistication. Now, there are still 900 million people in the world that live on less than $2 a day. But for $1,000 a year, we can double the income of a family living in extreme poverty, increasing assets, decreasing hunger, and most importantly, increasing sustainable earnings. For just over $1, for $1.26, we can cure a child of giddy-worm or schistosomiasis. For just over $1, we can spare an animal from a life of suffering on a factory farm. The philosopher Peter Singer theorizes about an expanding moral circle. He says that over the course of human history, we have learned to care about people from other races, other religions, other cultures, other city-states. I theorize that the next step in the expansion of the moral circle will be to include people from other countries. And it will one day include non-human animals, and it will one day include future human beings who will be born decades or even centuries from today. Effective altruism is continually pushing the boundaries of the moral circle and driving the evolution of moral progress. Making even the simple decision to donate to effective organizations can increase our impact by orders of magnitude. Faced with this fact, it should be clear by the light of our own values that it is no longer acceptable to just make the world a better place. This is too modest a goal. Instead, we should endeavor to improve the lives of as many people as possible by as much as possible, and use our altruism to do the most good we can. Thank you. All right, let's do this. Just taking the plane. Get over out there, so I've got photocopies.
This is he right here.
I've been waiting. I'll have you know. So I signed the Giving What We Can pledge back in when I was studying abroad at Oxford. I was actually right across the street from Giving What We Can, so they just walked over and put this letter in my pigeonhole. And even though I've signed it electronically online, I've been waiting to sign it in paper specifically because I had this event in mind for over a year. All right, I think we'll start with the 10% lifetime pledge. Who wants to be our appointed person to read that?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is the 10%, right? This one or this one?
Also, disclaimer: the letters take several months to get to you. Typically, not being because I was right across the street, but sometimes it will take several months to get to them. So I just have photocopies of mine.
Alright, the pledge to give, giving what we can to the organization. I recognize that I can use part of my income to do a significant amount of good. Since I can live well enough on a smaller income, I pledge that for the rest of my life, or until the day I retire, I shall give at least 10% of what I earn to whichever organizations can most effectively use it to improve the lives of others. Now and in the years to come, I make this pledge freely, openly, and sincerely. We have a ceremonial pen, and it's right there. Oh, it's right. It's on display. Should we? Why don't we read the other two pledges before we start the signs?
It's the same way.
Oh, it's the same pledge. All right.
Yeah,
So
numbers.
yeah. So someone else read the same thing.
All right, who wants to do the 1%?
For posterity.
I can do it. No, do you want to do it? Yeah.
You can do 10%. You can do 10% temporary.
Okay, yeah, alright. Yeah, sorry, you do the 1%.
Oh, okay. So the pledge to give. I recognize that I can use part of my income to do a significant amount of good. Since I can live well enough on a smaller income, I pledge that for the rest of my life, or until the day I retire, I shall give at least 1% of what I earn to whichever organizations can most effectively use it to improve the lives of others. Now and in the years to come, I make this pledge freely, openly, and
I recognize that I can use part of my income to do a significant amount of good. Since I can live well enough on a smaller income, I pledge that until the end of this year, I shall give at least 10% of what I earn to whichever organizations they can most effectively use it to improve the lives of others, now and in the years to come. I make this pledge freely, openly, and sincerely.
Or Dylan, why don't you start it first?
yeah.
Dylan.
Before Dylan signs it, I want to just say a couple words.
Oh.
It's nothing big. I just want to give praise where praise is due. Dylan has been a wonderful coach and life leader. He's really just, without him, Tufts Effective Altruism would not be a thing. I'm relatively certain of that.
Yes.
He's been inspiring to all of us. He's been my best friend since sophomore year, actually, kind of freshman year too. And it's just been a wonderful journey with him. I gotta say, he's literally the best human being that I know. I'm not exaggerating this in any form. I expect him to have the greatest impact of any person I've ever shaken hands with.
How about me?
You're like a really close second. Anyway, he's put countless hours into this group, and he's really made it work. He's been on our asses to make sure these things happen. We couldn't do it without him. And thank you so much.
I don't bow before many people.
Sure.
So when I first met Dylan, it was last year when we were studying at Oxford. And Dylan first talked to me about effective altruism. And I was thinking, oh, this guy's really superficial. Like, what is he talking about? Does he know what he is doing? Like, do you know? Like, does he know where he is getting the money to? Probably some like local charities, like in his home. Then he like started talking to me about like the idea of effective. Like, where should we give the money to? Like, how effective? Like, what is the amount of good we can do with that amount of money? And that idea just like struck me at a moment. And I think that is the best decision I have made in my life to be part of this group. And I hope you guys can also be part of our group in the future. Yeah. Thank you, Dylan. Yeah.
Let's start saying things. I think Dylan, you definitely go first. So I guess now is an appropriate time to start questions. You know, this is. Well, I mean, do we want to sign it each separately and then clap for each person? I feel like that's that's a little bit. That's too much.
Q&A and comment.
Yeah. Q&A comments. We welcome ask it to any of us, to all of us, to one of us. You know, go ahead. Sure.
So when the talk was going on, there was a point made about how a lot of one of the main points of the sort of the philosophy is that everyone all over the world is just as equal to themselves. And I totally get that. I agree with that personally. But what would be your feelings about a future where you guys start a trend or something, get people informed, and then another huge organization, maybe politically action starts up in the States that's sort of trying to feed off of your glory, but that exclusively helps people in the continent of the United States. Would you be opposed to that, or okay with it, or worried, or just not care?
Well, I think that would come down definitely to the specifics here. So one of the things that we would worry about is whether they're being effective. We understand that nations, obviously, being kind of a political entity and almost having a life of their own, they're going to be pretty selfish, right? You know, hopefully we can get as many people to be altruistic as possible, but if they're doing a very significant amount of good in the inside of the country, I guess I'd say I'm okay with it, as long as people are putting the rational efforts towards making the largest impact they can.
Yeah.
So I would be okay with it up until the point that it starts to absorb the funds and the people who would be coming to us and doing more good elsewhere in the world. But you know, there's limited number of people in the world who really want to do good, so I'm not too worried about if they're encouraging more people to do good. That's good, at least for the next 100 years or so.
That's still better than the present.
Right.
Even though there's room for to improve, but it is still
As long as the notion of the self still exists, there will still be people who are selfish. So maybe
for it against you, right?
Yeah. So maybe we have to pass that notion of the self.
Yeah.
Will we be seeing many of you on campus next year? In other words, how many of you are seniors? Sadly,
Seniors raising So only 4 of us.
Yeah, you see our faces.
Yeah.
So we're currently holding our interviews for the future, for next year's County Board. And if you are interested in the exam process.
Anybody want to ask us more on why we're giving specifically 10% or anything like that?
why not?
Yeah, why not 11? Well, 10's a nice round number. I think that's an easy one. So I guess I'll go. I'll give a little rendition of it. So when you look at the world having almost 1 billion people living on less than $2 a day, I myself, I haven't done the calculations, but it's well above the poverty line in the U.S. So I mean, I'm expecting probably around $60 to $70 a day is how much it costs for me. Maybe even more because I'm in college and I'm not making money. Okay, yeah, sure, probably over 100. Actually, yeah, almost 30 minutes. I can lessen that by 10% pretty easily without having to suffer basically any of the suffering that those people have to go through by living on only $2 a day. So I feel like 10% is almost the bare minimum at this point. If I really rationalize it and view myself as equal to them, 10% is a starting point. I hopefully will end up upping that percentage to wherever I'm comfortable. As soon as it starts to really debilitate me, which I really don't know what that point's going to be. That's when I'll stop. But I expect my overall percentage to be well above 10%.
Does effective altruism work as like a international like movement or interaction, or even like is there coordination between groups, or is it kind of more of an idea that's spread?
Do you want to take a bit?
Yeah, you get that.
That's an excellent question. I've been thinking about the problem of coordination quite a lot.
Could you speak up a bit?
As difficult as it is to coordinate internationally, it's almost as difficult to coordinate with Harvard and MIT. But yeah, we've been very fortunate this year to form a more tight Boston community of effective altruists. Internationally, so this was really started at Oxford, the Center for Effective Altruism in Oxford. Doing what we can, which is what we're tonight, is in Oxford. The Future of Humanity Institute is in Oxford. In terms of international coordination, I know there's a lot of crosstalk amongst researchers, say Giving What We Can in Oxford and Give Well, which is in San Diego, or the Effective Altruism Foundation, which is based in Switzerland. There's quite a lot of crosstalk between researchers, less so between just communities, but I think that's definitely something that needs to be
On the international scale, there actually is a effective altruism group in Korea. But it's actually founded by a guy of the same age of mine. He's actually a college student as well. So it's really just people playing with the ideology itself, because I think that unique thing about effective altruism is that it's not about, I mean, it is about what we do, but it's really the ideology, whether we can clearly understand it and live by it, that really matters. And once that happens, it's no longer like this coordination that matters, but small groups working together, and eventually it will be, I feel like, a natural coordination. It wouldn't have to be something that's top down, but more bottom up.
So do you not support any U.S. charities, or just predominantly support charities outside the United States?
Also, excellent question. So, the general rule of thumb is that the most effective international charities are going to be more effective than the most effective domestic charities. And it's not too difficult to see why this is. You know, the poorest 20% of the world's population are 10 times as poor as the poorest 20% of the US population. So you have a greater marginal impact by donating to someone who's 10 times as poor, because it's the same nominal value either way, which is much greater in real value to people who know more. Now, there are some possible exceptions to this, nowhere in Europe, but the one possible exception that effective altruists are, there's a lot of buzz in the A community about this right now, is the US prison system. Fixing the US prison system may be the one thing we can do in the developed world that is as effective as anything we can do. I think that's a pretty sad statement about the US. But it's also an interesting and hopeful fact that we're looking into fixing.
So, like, what about animals and treatment of wildlife? In the U.S., that's definitely
very interesting. Yeah, so Animal Charity Evaluators, which looks at animal well-being, is for now exclusively focused on factory farming. So not wild animals, but factory farming. And so something like 10 billion animals are slaughtered every year, slaughtered in very inhumane conditions. And I think that there's a very good case to be made that focusing on animal well-being is more effective than focusing on human well-being. The reason I spent so much time talking about human well-being is that, frankly, it's an easier sell. So I think there's greater marginal impact to be talking about. though when you compare the numbers, for me it's pretty close which charities are actually most effective. Now, in terms of wild animals, this really isn't something that has been quantifiably studied. But the founder of Effective Altruism, well, one of the founders, Will Pascal, he's a philosopher, guess where at Oxford. He wrote an article recently about how we should start thinking about reducing the suffering of wild animals. So I think that's something that's very interesting, that's at the moment not getting too much play in the effective altruism world, but I think in the future it will.
Just for all of you guys who are making the pledge, sorry. How has your friend, like how have your friends and family reacted to you guys making the pledge?
I suppose I can go to I came from a background where my mother originally was from Malaysia, but she's also particularly poor in Malaysia and lived off of for a longer period of time. Right? So she became a self-made woman, and money has meant very much so to her. Right? So she has started her own business and everything. She does well for herself. So in that sense, she does believe that monetary value holds a lot of weight, and for numerous reasons, right? For the security, for family, and everything else. So in me not particularly having that weight for myself anymore, because I always had money, there was some drama. She was not happy that I would make this pledge because she wants me to save money right now. Why would I not want to save money for the rest of my life with my family? Right? Like, these are the things that should be prioritized first, since my income is not guaranteed yet. I am not entirely listening to her. I'm pledging 10%. Right? So this will be from now on. That's only because an impact now, right? Even if I don't make that much money now, if I were to make my money right now, it will save people right now, right? So it has the longitudinal effect of having an impact now and forever. So I mean, certainly there was some backlash in my family, but ultimately the thought is, you know, if this is your life, you can do what you so desire, and we're proud of you for trying to be kind.
I actually haven't told anyone about your family, so I haven't seen any backlash. So that's great.
I haven't either, but I have no doubt that my parents would take it well. And as for my friends, it has ranged from indifference to support. So as long as it's not negative, as long as they don't think I'm an idiot for doing it. No, but there has been mostly support, and I really appreciate that.
So one thing that people sometimes consider is something like, oh well, I'm a student, I'm not earning an income. What am I supposed to give 10% of my year board tuition? No, that's not. So the pledge specifies, if you look at the fine print, this is also not legally binding, by the way. The member attrition rate is surprisingly low. So if you look at the fine print, they say something like, hey, if you're not earning an income, if you're retired or you're just a student, we would suggest giving something like 1% of your spending, which might amount to $20 a year. So it's not such a radical thing while we're still students. In terms of friends or family, I think there's an interesting point to be made about the fact that we are all friends. This is a community of people who share similar values and similar goals, and that's very helpful in helping us stay on track and motivating us to be better people.
So another thing, in the beginning of your talk, you mentioned it seemed like one of your axioms, I'm objecting to this mention, if maximize happiness over suffering. And I'm wondering, why did you form the connection between that goal and this specific type of organization? In other words, are there other activities that might be more efficient in this for achieving your goal? Or is your goal part of the reason why you're doing this, and another part because you actually love charities and personally want to do that?
So there are definitely a lot of ways to help the life economics on a very large scale. For example, influencing political policies. For example, doing specific research to engineer new medicine, or like a lot of things. But one of the things that is the easiest to quantify, that is that we are able to know for certain that will help the most people is charities, and is the charities that is recommended by Gatefold, for example, the Gates Foundation.
So that's sort of like it's been analyzed, and
Yes.
this is the optimal method to take political action.
No.
It's one of the most promising methods.
Yes.
Is the thing. As well as there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily in a position where they can just suddenly up and leave their current occupation for a different occupation. If let's say switching your career can be a particularly effective choice.
Yeah.
You have to basically be a freshman to really be able to just gear your entire educational path and career off of their launch with.
I just mean like let's just limit this to things that have a structure that will give some money every period of time. Sure. Are there any other of those that could potentially, like just software example, plug money from tons of people, political action, right? That actually is for something good. And I know that Leslie is trying to do that.
Well, there are a lot of ideas that are a little bit less empirically empirically supported, but that doesn't mean they're ineffective. Like MIRI, which is the
machine intelligence research.
Right. So existential risk of artificial intelligence can be really catastrophic for an infinite number of years. And so although it's not like directly impacting anyone's lives, donating to MIRI is not a bad idea because if you can impact the way artificial intelligence research goes to just make it a little bit safer, that might really just be the difference between continuing the human race and completely stopping it for years.
So here's a good example. We had a talk almost 3 weeks ago, two and a half weeks ago now, with MIT professor Max Tegmark. He's the co-founder of the Future of Life Institute, and he, at this moment, is particularly focused on creating a political movement to push for nuclear disarmament. I think this could be extremely high impact. I think this is a great project to be engaged. I think there's strong arguments to be made that driving for political change that will reduce existential risk is more important than global health development. Again, it's a bit of a difficult sell, which is why I don't tend to talk about it as much. But if I'm being very frank, I think these sorts of political movements that look at things like existential risk could be very effective. Political movements that simply support one candidate or another, probably less. This is because there will be some crowding in. So the more I donate to the correct side, whichever that is, however much I donate, this is going to crowd in funding for the other side. Right. So I think qualitatively that seems like it is very low impact to me, but qualitatively things like nuclear disarmaments, researching safe artificial intelligence, those would be extremely high impact. One of the top career recommendations by an organization called 80,000 Hours, which is based in Oxford, is to actually become a politician and get into office and do things that, and support evidence-based public policy. Yes, that's definitely something we're very, very concerned
I just have a question about like your use of the word effective, because like you use that a lot.
Yeah.
So when you say like effective, is that meaning like most good for the most number of people, or is that like calculated another way?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Abstractly, it's the most good for the most number of people, and non-human evidence, weighted according to what you think the work of non-human evidence is compared to.
It's used in the economic sense.
Yeah, it is used in entirely economic sense. So it's the most good per dollar donated or per hour worked, some sort of unit of measure. If you want to look at more concrete examples of what we mean by effective, our website has this our impact calculation. You can look at our impact. So one of the most common metrics that's used is a DALY, a disability adjusted life. So what you do is you look at the quality of people's lives under certain conditions, and you ask what the disease burden is. So how bad is living on $2 a day? What would that be like in terms of if I had some sort of disease? How would that affect my quality of life? So you adjust the quality of life for that, then you multiply it by the length of the life, and one disability adjusted life year is a full year of full quality life. So this is a practical measure that's used by the WHO, Innovations for Poverty Action Management Team. So that's a more concrete example, but abstractly you're absolutely right. It's just the most good for the most number of people.
So like the follow-up question to that is like so like by giving all this money, let's say you can save a life or something. Now that is definitely effective, but would it be if you built, let's say, I don't know, I'll use the country Belize for example. Instead of using this money to save these lives, if instead you build infrastructure, which may not be technically economically the most effective way to use money, but it will pay back dividends in the long run.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate that?
Sure. So we don't. When I say that we've adjusted our estimates for temporal discounting, what I mean is that the value of our donations, when we donate to people through Give Directly, say it accumulates over time. Because the people we give money to have increased sustainable earnings. So they are going to earn more over time, and that's what we're discounting for. Temporal discounting is not to say that the value of future human beings or future animals is less important than the value of present day human beings or present day animals. So some effective altruists disagree with that. Some believe that there is more moral weight that should be given to people and ends. I respect them as effective altruists, but I think they're philosophically incorrect about this. But I think there's a background issue that some of the questions have alluded to, which is something like, hey, what if the things you currently think are most effective don't actually turn out to be the most effective? Right? Is this sort of the motivation, the deeper motivation for that question?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see a lot of this is like very effective, but I just like question the long run effectiveness. So like it seems like you're trying to catch up on a problem that's going on, but instead of like trying to stab it 10 miles down the road and stop it from like a top-down perspective, as opposed to like trying to catch up on an issue that's built up over time.
Sure. The issue actually hasn't built up over time. It's getting better over time. And it's getting better at an exponential rate. If you look at the rate of extreme poverty in the world, it is dropping and dropping fast. If you look at the rates of child mortality, they are dropping steadily. If you look at the rates of deaths from violent crimes, they are dropping steadily. So the problems are decreasing. So we should be careful in thinking that, oh, this problem is built up over time. We clearly need some sort of deep structural change. But I think that there are structural changes that are needed. But it's also important to remember that sometimes it's a very easy and effective fix to just give someone a bed so they don't get malaria.
So I want to jump in on that. There are people who are dying right now, right? Because their standard of living is not on, right? So essentially we're trying to perfectly even that out. So people don't die, so they can actually make money, right? And then I suppose maybe down in the future, when people no longer have this disparity of standard of living, then we can start to invest in those kind of things. That's the reason why investing in just saving a life is so much more effective than pumping money into an economy that maybe won't work, right? Because the standard of living is so different, you're going to be saving money. That's why it's so much more effective in that sense.
So if we are able to do a simple calculation based on reasoning, based on evidence, systematically and scientifically to prove that a certain type of project will be able to benefit our community or the world more efficiently or more effectively in terms of the lives of people that project can save compared to giving to these charities. And I would say most people will change their mind in terms of giving charities who are going to this project, but we couldn't find this project so far. That's the reason why we're not doing that.
as well as the research that is conducted, is especially by JPAL. They research interventions in poverty all over the world, in all 7 continents, or 6 continents. Anyway, they a lot of their studies are randomized control trials that are pretty rigorously set up, and they monitor these people over 35 years or so, and show that like little tiny interventions can actually have a really major impact. And so we do have a long-term picture in mind when we're going to make these donations. It's not we're trying to take all of that into account. Obviously, it's a very complex situation, but just because of its complexity doesn't imply that we should do it.
I think there's also an argument to be made that by helping these people increase their average income, you're allowing them to build their own country better and more effectively. Because if they're not worrying about putting food on their plate, they would be, well, I mean, obviously this is not a concrete guarantee, but you would expect that they would be more capable to help themselves from that on.
I just add a quick comment. I'm probably one of the more skeptical of effective altruism person in the panel. And the reason why I donate 1% is I think the 99% of my income could be used somewhere else. I am still figuring out what would be better. There are, like you said, there might be long-term and structural issues we can help fix. I think 1% is a reasonable amount to buy the bandage, so-called. And you know, we don't just have bandage; we also need things like education.
So then, are you out of the question if you can't donate financially?
No, there are many other ways that you can help. So we're focusing on donating because that's tonight's event. But we've had previous events on high impact careers. We've had previous events on evidence-based public policy. So you can support evidence-based public policy. Check out 80,000 Hours Level, find out what the most effective careers are. So I was going to be a professional full-time philosopher before I discovered it, which is not to knock the professional full-time philosophers. You're wonderful. But in expectation, it's not typically the most effective thing you can do, which is why I'm going to be doing a master's in economics next year instead of a master's in philosophy.
Also, spreading awareness is one of the biggest things you can do.
Yes. Also, join our group.
Another idea is that some people are influencing high net worth person who have all the money to donate. Like if you can influence them, they'll be much more effective than you get in your own money.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the focus of this pledging is not that we're trying to like brag or show that we are making money or we're giving money. It's more that we want to make a statement for others so that we're setting an example for others as well if they want to join in. Because it's not about how much money we make, or it's not about how much money we give. It's about whether we can really spread the ideology and continue to allow others to know, allow others to join our movement.
Yeah, I'm going to be completely honest. I think our intention is very mixed. Part of that is bragging. But, you know, wow, we also want to do other things too. You know, if we just say that we don't brag, that's really a big lie. But you know, we do brag and we do, we're proud of bragging. But we also do other things that we feel also meaningful. I think that's a much more realistic thing to say.
You know what? I'm hiding this from my friends right now. Don't stay
I think that there's also, so if you're going to say, well, I don't have enough money to donate, I would just be very careful where you say that. Because even if you come from a background that's not particularly wealthy, coming to Tufts, after you graduated from Tufts, your expected earnings put you in the top 1% of the world's population.
And also,
so if you don't have money now, this is something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Also, just to add on that, the mindset that we don't have enough now is a very dangerous mindset. Just so we know, we don't have enough now, and when will we ever be have enough? So you just making that shift, or we have enough now, will be a important, or I think one of the more important things to spread that mindset shift.
To give kind of an example of us having enough, there was a study about a year ago that I'm not sure how strictly accurate this is, but it estimated that people who made about $70,000 were actually the happiest, and as you made more money, you actually became less happy. So I mean, like maybe $70,000 isn't strictly true, but if this trend, the trend is actually rather intuitive. There's a certain point where it's just waste. You think you want more, you actually don't. It's not going to make you any happier. And so if I ever find myself making over $70,000 or whatever the discounted amount is later, I will certainly be donating everything above that because it's not going to make me any happier. So what could possibly be the use of me keeping it, right?
Two questions. The first was understanding what you guys think about Silicon Valley and all of the startups and just young people who are extremely talented but attracting a lot of capital that maybe by your standards are not being invested in society, what that means. And also secondly, what you think about the value or lack of art and art design.
Speaking of the first question, so I'm actually interested in starting my social enterprise. So from experience, I can say that most of the charities who are non-profit they're constrained by their fundings, so they are not able to do whatever they want to achieve the highest income. Some borders say, "Oh, you should put this here," or like, "Oh, I wouldn't have enough money to do that," and also because of this, they are not very efficient. So social enterprise can actually use the business model from the private sector into charities, into NGOs to be more efficient, to be able to do the highest impact that they want. So I would definitely say that it is a trend in the future, and yeah. So.
If you look at the most the companies who started out they were the most money. What do you think about that? And then what is you have spread cards, but is it going to generate the same capital?
So what's
I think what we were saying. So my opinion would be if the startup is going to do good, is going to do good, then I approve of it. If it's not going to do good, then I don't approve of it. The general trend, there's no reasonable way for me to affect the general trend of all these startups starting up. So I think the best thing I can do is either cross my fingers or try to get as many startups as possible to have altruistic intentions, effective altruistic connections. As for anyone who's looking to do something, a startup is an excellent way to have a large impact. On the off chance that you make an effective startup, you will have a pretty major impact. So startups actually definitely one of the social entrepreneurship is one of the 80,000 hours top rated careers.
So the Silicon Valley one, I still believe that the bottom up kind of philosophy, in the sense that if I go to Silicon Valley with the ideology that I have and continue to talk about the things that's important for me, and if I'm going to like convince about 10 people to join my movement and start this whole effective altruism within Google and other big companies, I feel like that itself will start to trigger a change. It's not, I feel like top-down will be very difficult simply because trying to like change a lot of people at once is difficult. But I think this Airbnb guy was actually talking about how they actually focus on just trying to make the minorities' lives really good because the minority really benefits from it. They're going to talk to others, and it's just a chain reaction. So I feel like that's how we target Silicon Valley. That's how I'm hoping to target Silicon Valley. And I feel like that's why we just talked about you don't even have to pledge. It's all about can you actually carry this ideology and bring it with you to wherever you go. Like your job or where you like go shouldn't limit you. Like your field should limit what you think or what you do, but you should influence your field and where you go because I feel like ideology has that much power, and that's what we stand for.
And also, I don't think
So I was going to address James' question about the art, utility of art, because I think that's a really good question. I feel like Max Malcolm is really good at quantifying the utility of people's day in the world, but quantifying the utility of art is something that's may not come close to, or at least not yet. And I feel like that's super important. So for me, Max Malcolm is the answer to like, all charities, or always helping the world. Because I feel like art and music can go in a huge way in someone's happiness. Maybe not in like a underdeveloped country, but certainly like domestically or in my community. So I feel like art is very useful and like obviously be an all answer to everything, but it's certainly like one answer. Also, and just to clarify on this program, it's not saying that you shouldn't invest in yourself, right? So going to this university costs $60,000. Are we saying that you should be donating that $60,000 that you would be spending here elsewhere? I'm not sure if that's the case, right? Investing in yourself would be a very beneficial way for you to help the world, right? So investing the $60,000 for the rest of your education could make you more efficient, more effective human being. Likewise, I think we can extrapolate the idea to your startups, right? Well, startups can impact the world, but you need to invest the money to do so, right? So it's a misnomer to think that you shouldn't invest money elsewhere, right? And I think that's likewise for numerous other things, like these effective organizations that we're talking about. They invest money to show that they are effective. They invest a lot of money into research. Should they be using that money to help other people? I mean, that's kind of, it's a balance, right? They should probably do it so we know that they are, working like doing good. So we shouldn't, in essence, donate all our money ever to these things because of these things.
Just to add, I don't think we need to have a social enterprise to do good. Startups also do good. The products are meaningful. For example, one startup I work with, they are the largest. Yeah, they are now the largest ethically produced reusable bags producer in the world. So they, reusable bags. So they reusable bags. So yeah, and so they help to protect the environment, transfer cash back to India, and I think that is also a good thing to do, even though they are not a charity or a social enterprise.
I'm just kind of curious. What did everyone who's taking the question now major in?
I studied common brain science, biology, computer science.
Philosophy, math, and quantum.
Math and physics.
Common brain sciences and philosophy.
Computer science, philosophy.
Cognitive brain science and philosophy. With minors in computer science and economics.
No one's in arts.
So maybe suggested when you're canvassing for people, target the philosophy.
Oh yeah, we do that. Yeah, philosophy, computer science. Yeah,
the philosophy department loves us.
Well, I think it's the fact that philosophy just provides us with the rational tools to actually reason through what this actually means. And I feel like Toss philosophers are professors are really good at that. There's also, we actually have a philosophy meeting where we meet each 2 weeks to discuss about this. And I feel like during those times where we really have to think about just beyond ourselves, I think that's what I think there's a difference that philosophy made in me. Like when I read what Plato and what Socrates said before he died in Plato, just like his will was pretty much saying that when he dies, don't do good for my children, just do good for yourself, because you need to change the society. You're gonna make a better world for my sons and for the generations to come. And I feel like it just has to just like that we get exposed to in philosophy classes. They really make us become effective altruists, to think beyond ourselves and to think how can we actually live our life for the good of the world, but through reason.
Also, I think it's important to sort of sow the seed of effective altruism. Be that person in your friend group who's always advocating effective altruism. Be that person who's always talking about it. You know, maybe you'll get your friends who are really against donating to actually contribute in some way.
Yeah, and so being within effective altruism movement, you also need people who always disagree with you. effective altruism, and I usually play that role. But just speaking of just demonstrating.
Isn't the tax code for charities deductible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be another way to push higher.
But then I don't think that should be the reason why people do it.
So sometimes the
Well, I mean, there's a little bit of an economic incentive / social incentive where you're like, hey, you know, I'm donating, I'm doing all this good. Oh, plus I get a little bit of money back from the government. Ha ha ha. So I mean, like, yeah.
You know, it's funny too. Did you hear about Mark Zuckerberg recently pledged 99% of his income to effective organizations, and not through giving what we can, just and it was funny. One of the common criticisms was, oh, he's probably doing it for the tax loopholes. Really, you think he's going to get enough kickback to?
Pay zero taxes.
Just to clarify that.
Zero taxes on one
Mark Zuckerberg pays no taxes because he's paid entirely. He gets paid $1 a year, and the rest is in stock, which is non-taxable. So his new idea is that he's going to be funneling stock into these private organizations that will do good, right? And in doing so, they can't actually tax these organizations, so they are acting like a charity, but they don't have to have the transparency that charities have.
Right.
So I mean, I think it's an interesting idea. I'm not sure if it's entirely in line with what this is talking about.
But it definitely has. Well, it quite possibly has the right intention.
That's fair. Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely.
Just is it?
It's a pretty scary idea to have a few people going to like really happen.
Yeah. So if they're effective
It's a very scary idea.
You should democratize it flat.
Well, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, if the majority of the population remains non-effective altruists, then democratizing all decisions like this might not be the best. I mean, actually, no. Strictly speaking, it wouldn't be the best.
Yeah. At the same time, the whole idea if everyone becomes an effective altruist, then it doesn't mean anything. Literally, if everyone becomes an effective altruist, it doesn't really mean anything.
I'm not sure about that.
I don't know.
See, he's the skeptic.
I'm a big skeptic.
If there's any more questions,
Can I just say one more thing? Oh, yes. Yeah, because people don't like talk about that, like what happens like if everyone gets normalized or like if everyone's on this equal playing field. But then when I think about that, I just think that it's such an arrogant thing for us to say when we get so much, and yet there's people suffering right now. If there were lack of people suffering, if there were like numbers are like in some like less substantial amount, I'd be like, yeah, maybe. But when there's millions of people suffering and I say that and I hear that, I'm just like, alright, if you can save at least 10 people and say that, I'd be like, maybe. But when there's millions and you're just worried about that, I feel like it's just for one not right, and just arrogant for us to think that that's possible when the disparity is this great. So I think it's something that we should worry about more in the future, and we should focus more on the present of how can we reduce it now.
So we have vegan cake. I think we're gonna order pizza. All right, well, let's go to Stratton celebrate. Thank you all so much for coming.
Another big hand to Dylan for putting so much work in. Yep. So you're all welcome to come to Stratton. It's right next to Sogo. It's the quiet scenic dorm. There'll be vegan cake and probably some food and chill out with us. Yes. Thanks for coming.
Yo, Dylan, do you want that?
Wait, okay, no, you give it to Dylan that way. Yeah, there we go. I need a second. I didn't write down the 10%. You owe me a candle. Are we? Well, okay. Frankly, I really throw this out as soon as I get it. I'm gonna like just tape this to my roll right now.
It's not even colored. It's not even colored.
Thanks for coming.
I would have lost to say